Good afternoon everyone, welcome to Gylly Beach in Falmouth. My name is Stuart Bearhop. I'm an academic at the University of Exeter's Penryn campus, and I teach in the biosciences programs. And so we're here at the end of Species ID Week. Can't quite remember what the specific Wildlife Spotting Week, Wildlife Spotting Week as part of the summer sessions. And we're going to show you really what a fantastic place we've got here right on our doorstep. We're going to talk to some of our master's students who are doing research down here. They're going to talk about the teaching that went on down here, and then we're going to meet up with a guy who's involved in a big outreach project that our students get involved in. But the reason we're down here is actually one of the ways many of the academics on our campus almost certainly got engaged with animal biology is by doing what we're just about to do here. There's something fantastic about coming to a rock pool and seeing stones and then wondering what is going to be underneath it. There's always a little sense of anticipation. So I'm going to lift a couple of these and hopefully we're going to find something. This one's got a nice limpet on the top of it. There's some winkles and some top shells under here, and there's a little cushion star here. There, a little cushion starfish. Oh, is that? No, that's some coralline algae. Let's see what's under this one. Oh wow, well this is cool. So two, in fact not two, one brown crab, and if I touch that, you see the shell? This brown crab has just molted, and I'm going to put that back. I'm going to leave them there. This, I'll put, we'll turn. The other thing you have to do when you're turning these stones is put them back the way you found them and make sure the animals are safe. I'm going to show you this other thing. This is actually the molted carapace of that crab. If I lift it up, you'll see. So all its body's soft because it grows inside that shell, and all it leaves are these gills, and then the hard parts of the shell actually takes a lot of the chitin and calcium carbonate to create the shell. Here it's moving to another spot now, it's been discovered. I'll put that down there. I think we'll put it back under just in case something comes along, because it's... So that would be a soft shell crab, quite a bit of a delicacy in some parts of the world. I'm now going to take you to Laura. Laura is a master's student, but she did her undergraduate degree here, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she did during her time here. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, Laura?
Yeah, so the rocky shore is one of the most variable of all marine habitats. So the animals here have to be able to survive such a range of conditions, of different salinities, of different oxygen concentrations, and like today, the wind exposure, exposure to the sun. So really what we spent a lot of time learning about was how the different animals here are adapted in different ways to be able to live in such a harsh environment.
And you've got some stuff there. Can you tell us a little bit what you've got in this little pot?
Yeah, so as you can see in the little pot, we've got a couple of different types of sea stars. So although these are related, they look super different. So we've got brittle stars, which are the ones with the long legs that are moving much more quickly, and we've got some cushion stars. So the cushion stars, their sort of method of survival is they'll hunker down underneath a rock, and they'll just protect themselves from desiccation by staying wet and staying still, whereas the brittle stars, you can see that they can move a lot more quickly, so they can escape predation much more readily than the cushion stars can. And also, as you can see in the one that's in the corner here, it's lost a part of its limb. That's not a problem for the brittle star, it can regrow that. They can regrow even if there's half of their central disc remaining. They can regrow into, if you were to split it in half, they would regrow into two genetically identical brittle stars.
Right, that's fantastic. And so we're going to talk to you a little bit in a minute about your master's research, but what kind of things did you do down here as a student? What kind of activities would you do, or in your spare time, or as classes?
Well, as classes, it's a really good place to learn some of the fundamentals of biology. Yeah. So you learn things about island theory, which is basically the relative species-area relationship, so how big a rock pool is and how biodiverse it is. Yeah. In terms of spare time, it's just an amazing place to have on your doorstep. You live sort of 2 minutes away as a student, and I do a lot of paddleboarding, so I'd always be in the sea, snorkeling, paddleboarding. You can go right around the coast. It's just a beautiful place to live.
Superb snorkeling here. Your supervisor saw a little tiny cuttlefish off here just last week. I heard he saw one of the small cuttlefish, a very small one, did he?
I'm not sure what species it was, but yeah, I mean, again, like a lot
just
of the staff and students here, people are constantly in the sea. So
fantastic, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're now going to go and talk to Smile. Smile has a slightly different route to here. Smile, can you tell us about how you arrived on the campus here?
Yeah, so I'm an international student and I've completed my undergrad in India.
Right.
So we didn't have any opportunity to like do any research, so we didn't have any dissertation in our last year. But I was always interested in research, and so I was looking around for projects, and I found this cool crab hunting camouflage game developed by the Sensory Ecology Group. So I contacted the professor, Martin Stevens, and he was really happy to take me in, seeing that I had no background in research.
Brilliant.
And so here I am.
That's great. And you've got actually your study species in this little pot, and it's quite remarkable. These look incredibly different, but you've told me these are all the same species.
Yeah, they are all the same
Even
species.
These radically different coloured ones in here.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so they are all shore crabs, the common shore crabs. These small tiny ones are the juveniles, and they are like highly variable in colour and pattern, as you can see.
And what do we think that variation's about?
So juveniles are highly vulnerable to predators, as you can see. They don't have like a tough carapace or strong claws.
Okay.
So they need background matching and disruptive coloration to disguise themselves.
And you're trying to understand how they do that?
Yeah, I'm looking at this behavior of these shore crabs.
Yes.
And whether they are dependent on their level of camouflage or not. So I'm testing whether crabs of these different coloured camouflage, they respond differently to predators when they're present on matching light and dark backgrounds.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And of course, very easy to do because you can just come down here, collect some crabs,
that's
take them up to the lab and do your experiments and then bring them back at the end of it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We're now going to move on to talk to the last of our master students. This is Maria. At the Biosciences group at Cornwall is very, very interested in the impact that we're having on the environment. So a lot of the work and research that our academics and our students and research group do is on this impact, and Maria's going to tell us a little bit about something quite, well, very topical at the moment, isn't it, Maria? Can you talk a little bit about what you've got in that pot?
Yeah, so we do look a lot at anthropogenic pollution, and specifically with my research we look at plastic pollution. So I've got a little tub of all these treasures that I found in a 10-minute beach clean. The problem with plastics is that they're just so prolific and they don't really break down, they become smaller and smaller. So all of these bits of plastic are macroplastics, cigarette. So they're quite big, so they're bigger than 5 millimeters. And these will become smaller and smaller to microplastics. And these are very bioavailable for species, which means that they can ingest them through their food. So fish can eat them because they can be bright and colourful and look like their prey. But they can also breathe them in across their gills. And that's a problem that I found with my research, that crabs will breathe them in across their gills from the water column, and these can build up and have really detrimental effects on their growth, on their colour change and things like that. So it's quite a big problem that we have.
Right, and so what specifically are you researching as far as that goes? Is it you simply looking at the impact of those or the incidence of those in the crabs, or what they're actually doing to the crabs?
So I'm looking at how the ingestion and the accumulation affects colour change in shore crabs, as well as their growth in juveniles. So as Smile mentioned, juveniles are very variable, they match their background. It's a very costly process, so we think that by ingesting them, they've got far less energy, they don't respire as well, so they're not going to change colour as well, so they're more liable to predation.
And have you found, this looks, we're quite far away from big centres of population. Have you found quite a lot of plastics in them?
So these are plastics that I've had to feed them myself.
Right, so you're doing the experiment, right?
Yeah, but the concentrations that we use are far lower than the concentrations that we find in the environment. So it's quite problematic that even with low concentrations we're finding these effects.
And I think, there's been a number of projects here where people have travelled to really remote parts of the world and going onto beaches, and they're always finding plastic no matter where they are. So people, and then there was a student group went up to the Arctic Ocean last 2 or 3 years ago, and we're finding plastics on the beaches of Svalbard, which you couldn't think of in a more remote place than that.
Yeah, definitely. Even locally. So recently there was some research done by one of our researchers at Exeter that found microplastics in shark species found around the UK.
Yeah,
and
so it's just everywhere, and we still don't really know what impact it's having, but it sounds like for the crabs at least it could be a real problem.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thank you very much, Mia. We're now going back to Laura. Laura her research is on the more broad aspect of climate change in general, and she can talk a little bit about what you're doing, Laura, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what you've got in that pot. So what's your research on crabs actually doing in terms of trying to investigate climate change?
So sadly now the marine environment and really all natural environments are subject to multiple stresses from multiple sources.
Yeah.
So really what I'm doing is looking at the combination of climate change induced increase in temperature and also shipping noise, so anthropogenic noise pollution on colour changing and camouflage in crabs, so crab behaviour. So what climate change can cause is something known as a range shift, where animals can move to try to move to cooler areas, which in the marine environment usually leads to invasive species, where novel predators may be introduced to a different environment to what they're used to.
Okay. And so have you got any preliminary findings as far as that goes? Do you think there's anything that you stick your neck out on at this point?
Well, so actually the shore crab, it kind of reacts differently to how you might expect with temperature. So shore crabs are actually an invasive species in many parts of the world, and they actually do very well at a really wide range of temperatures. So at higher temperatures we actually find that their colour change is improved, the rate of colour change is higher, whereas when you add shipping noise into that equation, that drops right back down, so that shipping noise is very pervasive.
And so how do we think the shipping noise is affecting them? Is it just stress or?
Yeah, so it's not quite known from the research that I've done, but other studies that have been done on it have shown that under noise pollution, various animals become stressed, their metabolic rates increase, and they just become generally distracted, so their anti-predator behaviours might not be as quick or as effective as you might expect.
And I mean, a beach like this is actually a place that we tend to think of this as quite a benign place, but of course it's a very harsh place because the temperatures might change by maybe 20-30 degrees across the course of the day, mightn't they?
Yeah, definitely. So that might be part of what makes the shore crab such an effective invasive species, is that it has evolved to adapt to such a change of temperatures just throughout the day and throughout the year, which might be what sort of lends it to being so invasive.
Because I think when people think of rocky shores, they tend to think of them as being places where the animals have to survive the covering of the sea, but it's actually the opposite to that. The animals have to survive exposure, because most of the animals on the rocky shore are actually marine animals, and these pools can change in temperature quite dramatically across the day. They can freeze overnight in the winter, and of course the other thing that happens is because everything's in those pools, they're all breathing and all the oxygen's getting used up, and so they have to tolerate sometimes very, very low oxygen concentrations, and that's actually why it's quite an odd group of animals you find in these rocky beaches. And as you move further and further up, they become hardier and hardier. So we're right at the top of the beach now, and pretty much all that can survive up here are things like these limpets down here, these little guys here, and these top shells and these winkles. There's a little mussel in there, and actually a little anemone in there. But as you move down, it gets more and more diverse, and it gets more and more marine. So it's actually the best time to be here is right at the turn of the tide, because then you can get right down into the really exciting bits where there's all sorts of stuff to be found. So you've now got in your tub here a couple of recent arrivals. You're going to tell us a little bit about these recent arrivals.
Yeah, so mentioning what I was talking about, range shifts, we've got the little crab in the corner here. This is a St. Piran's crab. So these were actually only returned to this area in about 2016. So they weren't previously known before that, from about 1980, and we think that they might have come back partly due to climate change. And additionally in here we've also got some Japanese wireweed, which I believe is Sargassum muticum, which is believed to have come in due to the oyster trade. So it's a result of what we know as hull fouling, where the ballast water from ships that travel large distances introduces new species into the area when it's released in that area that it gets to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we do have this little guy here. I'm going to pull him out, or her out. We do have common hermit crabs on this shore as well, and it's very hard to see, but the main way of identifying these little guys is their pincers. The common hermit crabs have got quite asymmetrical pincers, and these guys have very similar size ones. Just, I don't know if you can see that one there. Can you see it? Right. So you can see it's just poking out. And of course, this shell is not being secreted by this crab. This is a dead periwinkle shell, and these crabs will actually fight for them. So they've actually got a very soft little body that they have, and they fight one another, take over them. And if you look out here, you can see some of the ships that Laura was talking about. These ships are coming from all over the world, and of course if they're coming in here empty, they quite often have ballast water in them that might have been collected in, for example, in this case probably the Pacific this has come from, and the larvae or the spore stages of these plants and animals can survive the journeys, and then of course when they start taking on the goods, etc., that start taking on, they discharge that ballast. That ballast gets into the water, the larvae arrive, and of course stuff starts to gather on the beaches. Thank you very much, Laura. I'm going to now head over to Ben, and Ben heads up something called the Rockpool Project, and he is doing some really fantastic outreach work in this area, and also a lot of our students end up volunteering from. So Brent, could you just tell us a little bit about the Rockpool Project?
Sure.
Tell us what inspired it in the first place, I think.
Okay, so I'm a biologist myself, and I do a lot of research on biodiversity patterns and across large geographical areas, and that brought me into the whole world of citizen science, because quite often when you're dealing with that kind of scale, you need to recruit the general public to collect the data to work on. So I've been working with the general public for a long time, and it inspired me really to set up this independent not-for-profit organisation that can actually do that on a long-term basis. And in terms of why we did it in the rock pools, I think Stuart, you've just done an amazing job of explaining why that is. We absolutely love discovering wildlife, and there's no better place to do it than out here on the rock pools. And these are some of the best rock pooling sites that you'll find in the country, if not the world. So we can't get enough of it.
Fantastic. And so what kind of stuff have you got in here at the moment? I noticed there's some really nice little scallops in here. There's a little guy there. This is this aquapectin, or is it a queen scallop, or is it
It's
a
a very
juvenile?
scallop.
Is that a juvenile or an adult?
That's pretty much adult size. We have got a smaller one in here somewhere that's bombing it around all over the place. So these are pretty cool. So these are mollusks, okay? They're called bivalve mollusks. They've got two shells, a bit like mussels that you pointed out on the rocks over there. They can pull them really tight. And unlike mussels, they can actually independently move. I thought that fellow was going to do it now. When they can clap those two shells together and then just shoot across our mobile rock pool that we've got here. We've got quite a lot in here. Quite often people come to our mobile rock pool and think, oh, you haven't got anything in it. But that's because we put the rocks in here, and that's where a lot of your marine life would like to hide. So Stuart, if you want to be careful there, because we've got the old bootlace worm right near the finger.
Sorry.
You're right there.
I see it, yeah. So there's a nice,
there we go. We've got an edible crab heading out of there. Have you spoken about the edible crab yet?
Yeah, we had one down there. We have got another one in here. It'd be quite nice for you to hold. You hold that one and I'll grab the other one, and we can have a bit of a look at the two.
Leave me with the aggressive.
I'll take that one. I'll take that one if you want.
Don't worry.
So these are two of the more common larger crabs that we get on the beach here. This is a male edible crab by the shape of its little tail there, and this is a female velvet swimming crab there. Now these look superficially very similar, but if I put the edible crab down, you can see it's got almost like a kidney shaped shell. And the edible crabs tend to be or brown crabs, they're also called brown crabs, they're called edible crabs because they're the ones we eat most commonly actually. But they tend to be very docile, they tend to play dead, whereas these guys over here have a completely different strategy. These are really hardcore, and they can give you a real sore nip, particularly the big ones. And if you look at this one, if you can you tilt it, Ben, so we can see the colour of well, you can see it's got a very broad, this is a female with this very broad tail here.
You want to see the back?
I want to see the carapace, yeah. And Ben's quite rightly holding it as gingerly. You can see the carapace is a completely different shape, and it's got these ridges on the front, these bright vermilion eyes, and actually it's called velvet because there's a little bit of fur, or these are chetae on there, and of course see these very flat back legs. These are called pleopods, and these are the swimming legs, and so that's where the velvet swimming crab name comes from. There's also another species of crab that we've got down here, this little guy here. This one is a furrowed crab, and looks a bit like the edible crab, but you can see it's got these kind of furrows, hence the name. And of course, it's got very massive claws compared to its body. The brown crab's a bit better proportioned. So lots of really cool things, and you can see why people love this kind of thing, because it's a great opportunity to pick things up and get engaged directly with nature, and I think that's really important this day and age. So what about student opportunities? How do our students get involved with you, Ben?
Well, we've been going for about 2 years now, and since the beginning of those 2 years, we've been working very closely with the university and students, undergraduate students and postgraduate students. They've been, I'm not exaggerating, absolutely instrumental from taking us from nothing to we're now doing all sorts of stuff throughout the southwest. So sadly, some of those people that have been with us a couple of years are graduating now, and we are going to need to replace them. So if any of you guys are interested in getting involved with us, then please do get in touch. You can visit our website with rockpoolproject.co.uk, and we'd be glad to hear from you. There's all sorts of ways that you can get involved, starting from just doing some surveys for us. We do biodiversity surveys once a month throughout the southwest, but we've got loads of sites here in Falmouth you can do. Going through to really getting involved with the project. We have people doing social media work. We work a lot with schools, so we run events, helping us run those kind of events. And actually, we have people who actually do their research project with us as well. So we've got a huge amount of data already, and a lot of that needs to be analysed for various different things that we're looking to find out. So there's all sorts of ways. Really.
Students can almost certainly do projects with you. We could do the research.
Most definitely, yes.
I mean, I think the thing we need to recognise is that social media and citizen science is increasingly important today, because we need to be engaging people with nature if we want to get people protecting it. And things like this, where you can come down and get your hands on things and get that experience that's like probably you had and I had as a 7-year-old on a beach, turning a stone for the first time and seeing a starfish under it and thinking this is incredible. Really, really important stuff. So that is it for just now. I think we're going to leave it there. There's no summer sessions next week because we've got graduation. We're having a virtual graduation ceremony. The week after that we have a cat week, and so look out for that stuff on social media as far as that goes then. We're now going to go over to questions. We've got everyone that you've just seen interviewed is here. Fantastic range of knowledge from these people. So if you have any questions, I'm going to pull a phone out of my pocket and see if there are any coming. If you have any questions, please feel free. Right, okay, we've got lots and lots of questions. Amy from Penryn, is the bioscience department involved in any local conservation projects? Well, you obviously asked that before we spoke to Ben, but yes, we are definitely involved in lots of local conservation projects. Not just on the beach, we're doing stuff down on the Lizard Peninsula on rare habitats, we're doing stuff on rare animals and plants in the region, so yes, very much so, and a lot of the students do their projects locally and work on local conservation issues. Eve from Ken, aren't those green crabs invasive somewhere? Yes, and you preempted, you obviously asked that before we got to that point, but yeah, the green crabs, as Laura said, they're invasive in many parts of the world, particularly Australia. Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the range of the green crab is actually really extensive, so they're like the warmest places they are is sort of off the coast of Sydney and off the east coast of the US. So you can see sort of how far they've spread from their native range here, and then they also are present in like really cold waters from sort of right down at the bottom end of their range, about like 15 degrees, so from like 15 to 25 degrees is sort of their larval development range. So they're a very pervasive species across a lot of the world, but here they are native to us here.
I think the big problem in the Australian aquaculture industry as well, I remember reading something about that, is that not right? They've got real problems with them invading parts of Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they're a lot more, I mean, we could see here that there's a lot of them here, they are a survivalist, so I can imagine them causing great problems in terms of competition for food and resources in the Australian aquaculture. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Neve from Chamonix says, do you ever see dolphins or whales from the beach? Well, I have seen 3 species of dolphin from this beach. I've seen common dolphins in that little bay there. I've seen bottlenose dolphins in that bay. I've seen common dolphins out here, and I've seen Risso's dolphins off the point here. Further out in the bay, we regularly, well, I say we have there's a charter boat that many of our students work with. They go out there very regularly. They see minke whales regularly. They occasionally see humpback whales, and they've seen fin whales, offshore bottlenose dolphins. So yes, we do. I mean, not every day. And it's very notable, and it's a big exciting day when you see them, but they are here. So there's a little cafe round here. I've been sitting in the cafe and watched the dolphins go round. So yes, Neve, we do. Jolyon, do the crabs change colour with habitat? We covered that, didn't we? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Smile?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the escape response of these shore crabs. They do tend to change colour with their habitat, so when they are present in a darker background, they tend to go darker, and if they're present on a lighter background, they go light.
Right, and then we've got another one. I think, I'm not sure who this is from, I can't see who it's from. can undergraduates get involved in research on camouflage? You guys can answer that, because did you do this?
You absolutely can. So for your third year research project, you usually get paired with a supervisor. So I personally didn't do this for my undergraduate, but I believe Laura did. Undergrad camouflage? No. Okay, no. Well, people do. So for example, Jim Galloway, he did some of his undergrad research on that kind of thing. He looked at chameleon prawns, and then he went on to look at them for his master's and his PhD. So chameleon prawns, so they're little prawns, and they're called chameleon prawns because they change colour. So they ideally match to their substrate, so you get green and red morphs, and they will pick their background to match them. That's because they preferentially eat those seaweeds.
Amazing colours as well. I mean, the greens and reds they turn are really, really vibrant colours. They're fantastic. Yeah. See-through ones. I'm not seeing the see-through ones.
So they're quite hard to find.
Yeah.
Specifically, so they're kind of an intermediate strategy, but we find them less commonly. So right now we're trying to do research to find out why they're see-through, why they don't pick being red or green, because it could be more costly to produce this kind of weird see-through appearance.
So certainly plenty of opportunities to get involved in projects down here. Another one is, how long do creatures survive when stuck in a shallow rock pool, i.e. food sources available? Do they rely on the tide coming back? Does anyone, do you want to answer that one? You can answer that one, Ben.
Well, some of the hardiest creatures will have to survive if they're right up high on the shore for even up to a week, because even though we have the tide coming in and out every day, it also goes through cycles called neap and spring tides, and it's only the spring tides that really reach up far and go out far. So species which are right up here, they can be left for as long as a week, and that's why, as Stu was explaining earlier, that you only get a few species that can actually tolerate that, and they need to be able to not dry out completely during that time. So they have various different mechanisms. We were talking a bit about the tooth top shells here. Totally, they're all over the place in the high shore here. They can actually, they've got like a door to their shell basically called an operculum, which they'll close up, and they'll keep as much moisture as they can in over there until the tide comes back in, and then they can come out and graze again. So that's just one example, but there's a few species that are up here that are able to survive for that long.
Fantastic. Laura, we've got one for you. Somebody's asking, R is asking, oh no, I think I'm not sure who it is, but do we think the noise pollution from those ships cause problems for wildlife in general? So it started raining here. It's the first time it's raining. Well, it's not actually the first time it's rained since yesterday. Do we think it's causing problems for wildlife in general?
Yeah, so there's actually a growing body of research about pollution in the marine environment, especially with the increases in shipping and trade that's happened as areas get more urbanised. So generally, in terms of what we know, sort of perhaps the biggest example that we have is the impact that it has on whales and other diving cetaceans. So when an animal dives, if it then hears a noise, a loud low frequency noise, say from a big ship or from pile driving or from sonar, then it might return to the surface too quickly, which can cause the animal equivalent of the bends, which is what a diver gets if they come to the surface too quickly. And that's basically a decompression sickness, and means that you end up with higher levels of strandings in those animals. So it can really cause really fatal effects onto various marine wildlife. So it's a really big problem.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Laura. This is another one for Ben, I think. How long can we safely look at animals from rock pools without damaging them?
Well, I mean, you can if you keep them in good conditions, then I mean, there are people that keep them in tanks, so obviously if you do that, then you can keep them for a long time. But a lot of people, when they're just on the beach, they'll fill up a bucket full of wildlife and then they'll leave it in the hot sun, and a lot of things will die pretty quickly under those conditions. So it's very important that if you're going to remove them, you don't actually have to remove them from the rock pools when you're exploring them. You can just, when we're doing our work, we'll just take a picture and put it back, basically.
Or a little, what we've got here are effectively takeaway Tupperwares, and actually getting them into Tupperware, you can quite often get a much better look at them.
That's right,
you?
yeah, it's good for
and
you.
So, but the key is, all of these animals will go back to roughly where we found them. They'll certainly find their way back to good places to be. And these animals are hardy and they're robust, but they're not they're not immune to
not
treatment, so
immortal.
you do have to look after them carefully. Katie Fox asked a question: is there an adaptive function to creatures fluorescing under UV light? Does anyone know the answer to that? Colour people. I mean, it's a really interesting one because there's a load of creatures do it, like scorpions do it, and Dave snails do it. I'm not sure what the story is behind that. I don't have really any.
It's not a great answer, but I've got a feeling no one knows.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
my feeling that there's still people trying to work that out, because I guess the person asking the question realises that a lot of the species here, things like anemones and stuff, will glow like crazy if you show UV light on them. So
Yeah, and I think it might be something to do with signalling. So if they can see UV light, then you could imagine it's something to do with sexual attraction or something like that as well. These kind of bright things are quite often to do with that. Certainly, I'm going to talk about birds because that's my speciality. Lots of birds have got quite pronounced UV patterns in their plumage, and we think that's largely about intersexual signalling and intrasexual signalling. Dave asks, do we think the tourists are affecting wildlife? Does lifting these stones and transporting animals up and down the beach, what kind of impact does that have on the wildlife? Do we know?
Yes, so I know that a lot of people think that it can have quite a severe impact. It definitely does, in terms of you can notice a site if it's regularly visited by tourists, particularly if they haven't been careful putting the rocks back. I wouldn't say that there are many species that are under threat from that kind of activity.
Yeah.
There's plenty of sites out there which are untouched, and also a lot of the species don't just live in the intertidal zone. They have populations which are out to sea as well. But on an individual level for animals, the tourists, well, not just tourists, local people as well, sometimes can cause them some damage.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a very difficult question because, of course, the impact that an experience like this has on people can be hugely life-changing, and so it's a very tight, or a bit of a tightrope you have to walk, thinking about how you allow people to engage with nature and without damaging nature. Okay, it's not an easy one to deal with. Do we think the crabs are adapting to plastics and boats? Is there any sign of that, Maria?
So in terms of plastics, I don't know much about boats, you have to go to Laura for that. Juvenile shore crabs, or just juvenile crabs in general, they molt quite frequently because they're still growing. And as Stu pointed out when he opened up that molt, they get rid of their gills and they grow new ones. So by doing that, they're actually able to shed a lot of the microplastics quite frequently. So that, at least whilst they're juveniles, can sort of keep the problems that would cause at bay. But as they get older, they molt less frequently until they stop molting. Obviously then you've got a larger build-up and there's not much you can do about it, which is a problem.
In terms of the shipping noise, we actually haven't found any evidence that crabs can acclimatise to it, which doesn't really bode particularly well for them. We've done experiments previously where we've exposed naive crabs to ship noise and then simulated a predatory event, which is literally just where we tap a dowel rod into the water, so there's no danger to the crabs. And we have exposed either naive crabs who've never heard ship noise before and crabs that have actually heard ship noise for a previous 6 weeks, and we found no difference in the response, which sort of implies to us that there is no acclimation going on there. Which is a shame, but it's an area that does need more research because that's only one species, and I'm not sure if it's been demonstrated in other species as well. So.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. As you can possibly see, the front that we've been hoping was going to arrive at 5 o'clock has arrived about half an hour early, and we're all starting to get a bit wet. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. If anything comes in, we'll definitely try and answer it. So if you still have questions, feel free to keep sending them in. That is the end of this week's summer session. Check out all the material for this week's session on the links below here. As I said at the start, next week we're going to be celebrating our graduation, and so we'll not be doing anything of this nature next week, but the week after we'll be back again, and it'll be on the intriguing world of cats. So thank you very much for watching, and thank you everyone here for your contributions.
Bye-bye. Cheers.
We're away to get a nice hot cup of coffee because it's a bit cold down here.